God moves through us in the most impossible moments in our lives. "500 years before this movement with Moses and the parting of the Red Sea, God made a promise to Abraham, a promise for land, for descendants, and for blessings for him and for all people. And today, in this moment with Moses, God is showing his continued promise, the promise for the promised land, the promise for a future. We kind of jumped it. We made a big jump from last week with Joseph to Moses. And I'm just going to touch on that just a little bit because there's 500 years and a lot of things that went on. Joseph became the second in charge in Egypt, providing for so many, and the Israelites were brought to Joseph. But when Joseph passed away, and when the Pharaoh of that time passed away, so did that relationship. While they remembered Joseph and heard stories of Joseph, Joseph wasn't active anymore. And the new Pharaoh wanted the power over everything and wanted the greed over everything. So the Israelites that had came to Joseph to take care of now became the slaves of Egypt to grow this gigantic empire where the Israelites were to do all the work. But God promised God's people, the Israelites, that they would have their promised land, that they would have their descendants, they had a future, and they would be blessed into that future. And so when the time came and the Egyptian Pharaoh was making all these horrible conditions for the Israelites, it was time to put into action to release the slaves. God did things by putting terror into the people, by putting things out of plagues and killings and all these different begging and pleading ways of what was going on. Yet it took Pharaoh's own son to die before Pharaoh would say, fine, the Israelites can leave. Here today we have Moses leading God's people from Egypt. Not an easy task to gather all these people and travel on foot with the belongings that they would want to bring and the things that they would need to survive this journey, as Moses by himself doing this. But it's God's actions that follow in this that made this all possible. And now we get to a very climatic point in this journey that Moses is taking. We get to the point where Moses and the people are at the shore of the Red Sea, and behind them is Pharaoh's army. Because once the people were released, Pharaoh realized his empire couldn't survive without all the people that did the work. Pharaoh only had this big, glorious thing because he had all these people doing all the work for him, and if they left, who was going to work? Who was going to provide and give him everything he wanted and needed? So he assembled the army, and they were coming after the Israelites, and here they are at the sea, stuck between a rock and a hard place. I think most of us can think of times in our lives where we have been in that position. We have been stuck between two bad outcomes. And how do we navigate through it? Do we take the hard place or we take the rock? We've been in that position. Do we jump into the water and try to swim across and maybe some of us can survive it? Or do we turn around and try to defend ourselves against this army that is way stronger and has more than we do? I was about 19 years old when I had my first full-time job at a fast food restaurant. And I was offered a promotion to work full-time. I was offered a promotion into management. This meant benefits and vacation time and an opening for all these opportunities. And I thought it was a wonderful, wonderful moment. But then the other shoe dropped when my boss said that in order to get this position and to get this promotion, I would have to help them do something that would hurt a dear friend, a coworker of mine. For me to get this position meant my coworker to lose their job. It was the rock and the hard place. Do I accept this promotion, which would really help my family out? Or do I hold on to the integrity of being this coworker, this friend, knowing that my success would mean her failure? Her failure to provide for her family in losing her job. It was an impossible situation. In the end, I didn't say yes to the promotion. In the end, I left. But like the Israelites to Moses, I questioned what was going on. Why did I have to be put into this situation? What is the point? The Israelites made these same comments. Why didn't you just leave us in Egypt and let us live the miserable lives that we had at least, but at least we weren't going to be killed? Yet God opens the possibilities that in those moments of that rock and hard place, we can't always see. In my story, God doesn't part a sea and make a clear break out of the impossible and into a possible. But God did show me that I didn't just have those two options. I didn't just have that rock and that hard place. I took option number 3. With my integrity and honor intact, I left. I went and found a new job. And about 4 years later, that coworker and I ended up working at another place together because she left too. In the midst of our suffering, in that place where we feel nothing but being stuck, Moses speaks God's words by saying, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and see the deliverance that the Lord will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to keep still." God is telling us in those moments of that rock and hard place, that impossible situation, to pause. Still yourself for a moment. Let God do the work for you. Be patient. God is mapping out that moment to open the sea for you to get through. Let your faith take control of that moment. Moses extended his hands, struck the rod on the ground, and the Red Sea parted to bring the people to safety. They crossed the Red Sea on dry ground with walls on both sides because God wanted them to be saved. God promised 500 years before that that they would get to the promised land, that they would have many descendants, and that they would be blessings for all. The promise that is still with us today. Do not be afraid. Stand firm in your faith and know that God will provide your way. Amen.